So when I first moved to DC, I had absolutely no damn clue what I was doing in this city. I had never been here except for an obligatory 6th grade field trip to the Air and Space Museum, and I didn't know a single person that lived here. So having recently ventured into the world of online dating, I figured that would be a perfect way to get an orientation to the 202, and I promptly embarked on what became known as a bars and bedrooms tour of the 202. I'm sure you can imagine this resulted in some pretty terrible dates. However, no date was as terrible as when I met the pollster. As you can imagine from his name, he did indeed work at a polling agency in the DC area, but what I'm not quite clear on is whether his personality led him to pursue this career as a perfect fit, or if the techniques he learned 9 to 5 just accidentally embedded themselves into his off-the-clock persona. We had started chatting on OkCupid, and on there, his questions had seemed genuine and curious and inquisitive, and a far cry from the mansplaining I generally have to deal with. So I agreed to meet up for a first date. We met over the weekend at a Smithsonian, and as we started to tour the exhibit, his questions took on a little bit more of a clinical tone. How would you rate this museum on a scale of 1 to 10? Like a 6 or a 7? Can you please list the Smithsonian museums in order from most favorite to least favorite? I mean, I like art museums, so those would be at the top, I guess. We moved on to get some food, at which point he said, "Do you prefer eating indoors or outdoors? And what factors influence this decision?" Outdoors, unless it's raining. And how do you think this ramen shop compares to others in a comparable price category? I mean, it's average. I don't really know ramen that well. I would like to add that I was trying to add some degree of color and context to the margins of these questions. However, he continued to query me with such swiftness and such directness that I started to wonder if maybe I was part of a focus group he was conducting on how he could construct future and, I guess, better dates. And then there was the sex. In retrospect, I really don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I thought it would cut the tension, or we could turn our interrogation into a conversation, but that really didn't pan out. I had rolled over to check my phone, and I hadn't managed to even see what time it was before he started in with, "Can you please rate this sex on a scale of 1 to 10? A 6 or a 7? Can you please describe sexual positions in order from least favorite to most favorite? No. Can you please give me the number of sexual partners that you've had divided by gender? I admit it's around this point where I sort of blacked out and don't really remember what I said, but I am pretty sure I did have the thought, I don't care what I'm saying and the validity of my statements as long as it's what he wants to hear, so he stops asking me questions. I scurried around his apartment trying to quickly gather up my clothes, and I'm sure made up some excuse about how I was terribly late for something it was imperative that I be at, while he continued to exit poll me all the way out to his doorstep. Once I got back to my own apartment and reflected upon the situation, in addition to now understanding how polling bias occurs, I also realized that I felt like I had truly arrived in DC. I recognize that this city is so much more than all of the unfortunate stereotypes that it gets labeled with, like there's only interns running around in red and blue power suits and C-SPAN is on every television in the city. But I still can't think of anything more quintessentially Washington, D.C. than being polled about a date while you're on that date. I've moved on to different approaches in my dating life, and I hope that the pollster has as well, but there was at least one silver lining that came out of all of this. There was one question he asked me I was able to answer concisely and honestly and clearly. The next morning, I had a text on my phone that said, "Yes or no? Would you like to go on a second date?" No.